Where's my Bob Calandro's drum?
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Conflict Resolution Minnesota's Healing the Political Divide community conversation. We're letting everybody in, and we will be starting shortly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Hello, one. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Everybody clap. Come on, let me see y'all clap. See y'all clap. Oh, good. Hey, why am I not able to see the whole gamut? Oh, there. Wow. Okay, it's good. Everybody on. Taylor, I can see you. No, I can't. I see your smiling face. Get on it. Get on it. Facilitator 2, hi. Wherever you are. Facilitator 8, welcome. 7, 3, wow. Man, y'all, don't y'all have names? No, I'm just kidding. Phone number 612-840-5752, welcome. And facilitator number 10 is there. And of course, Dave is here. 5 is here. Man, who let Jane in there and made her one? Wow.
Good to see you too.
I know, Jane. It's been a minute since I've seen you.
It's been a long time. It's good to see you.
So welcome, welcome. Appreciate all of you for being here. So I want you all to make as much noise as you can on the count of 3, right?
Already.
I'm gonna do my thing. Okay, everybody, 1, 2, and 3, go. Woo! Let it out. Hey. It's a stress reduction method.
Yeah.
Let it out from your gut level. Just kind of scream. Let it out. Right. So welcome to our sort of regular monthly, right, a webinar session. CRM has been putting this together since May, and some of you have been here since May. So if you have been here since May, raise your hand. Give yourself a pat on the back. So, right. So because Mike has been kind of learning from the rest of us so that he can be present and do his stuff in the coming months, right, Mike? Mike Gregory, yes. Hi, Sharon. Sharon Press in the house. Everybody give it up for Sharon Press. If you don't know who is Sharon Press, that's all right. We love her. So welcome to this event today, Healing the Divide, right? Healing the Divide. Lindsey is here. I'm going to kind of shade Lindsey every now and then, but she's the main show. Dave has jumped in to help us out with his facilitators. Right? So want you all to remember, if your Facebook is open and you are able to juggle a couple of things, make sure you like us on Facebook. If you haven't, I can watch and make sure that I know Facilitator 10 hasn't liked us. So I will hop on you, right? So Facilitator 10, you better get to your Facebook and do us. Not do us, but like us, right? So as far as the basics of Zoom is concerned, right, y'all, please understand that Zoom is it can pick up a lot of things, right? So if you don't want us to see you, right, like Miss Brenda Burnside, Queen, President, everything, right? Don't come too close to the camera because we can see your pores, right? That's how bad it is, right? I've seen people's nose hair. I'm like, okay, that's cool, right? I'm glad that you have some hair to protect you. So make sure you take care of yourself. throughout this process. And turn it off, turn it on whenever you need to, right? This webinar series is meant to help us kind of stay engaged, meet our colleagues and peers in the field, and also kind of learn from each other, right? Learn from each other. So this idea of listen, learn, and only then lead is something that we want to kind of nurture in this process. We all are here to learn, even though Lindsey and I are here to facilitate, but we definitely will be leaving here full because of what you have shared with us. So please bring it, right? Please bring it. I want to, at this point, just kind of do a land acknowledgement, right? And enslavement acknowledgement. So I want to invite all of you to gently close your eyes, if you will, ground yourself, place your feet on the ground, right? Feel that ground underneath your feet. If you're standing, right, do the same. If you're sitting, do the same. Come to this place of rest and begin focusing on your breath as you breathe in and breathe out, right? Just kind of check with your body. Where are your stresses? Where are you feeling comfortable? Where are you not feeling comfortable? Just kind of breathe into those spaces to kind of make yourself feel comfortable, right? Be present and gently, as you breathe in and breathe out, engage that diaphragm, right? Let it rise and fall as you breathe deep. As you breathe out, right? And let your amygdala kind of rest, right? Lindsey will guide us through that process later. We just let your amygdala rest, right? Come be in the prefrontal cortex, kind of let yourself process the information and what you're hearing, right? As you listen deep. Continue breathing while I read this statement. Land and enslavement acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that no matter where most of us are currently located in the United States, we, most of us, spend today and every day on land stolen from indigenous people and cultivated by the enslaved community. It is essential to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside and benefit from this land, and to seek to understand our place within the history of genocide, enslavement, settler colonialism, and ongoing racism. Land and enslavement acknowledgements do not exist in the past tense or historical context. Settler colonialism and white supremacist ideology is a current, ongoing, and cultural and systemic need, and we need to build the mindfulness of our present participation in the placement of the need. Right? I want you to breathe, continue, just think about those words, right? Think about what I just read. I want to invite you back and again, ask you whenever you are distracted today, right? Go back into that breathing. Let it guide you back, right? Let it ground you, guide you back to this process of listening, learning, and I think one of the reasons and one of the thought behind today's conversation and the ongoing conversations have been also informed by what had happened in our communities, right? May 25th woke many of us, right? Memorial Day turned into a reconciliation day, a day of remembering, right? I asked myself, where was I when I heard the murder of George Floyd, right? That's how significant that event has been. I asked myself the same question, where was I when Philando Castile was shot, right? Only 4 years ago. So it woke some things in me, and I know a lot of my peers and the people I hang with, right, also woke up that day, right, and began to ask the different types of questions. And then we saw on the steps of Minneapolis yesterday, right, the government building, some rumbling about which direction Minnesota is going to go in terms of examining this murder. Right? There's all kinds of contentions around it. So it is not what happened in May 21st, right? The past is present, the present is future, and the future is the past, right? It is all part and parcel of our circle, right? Part and parcel of our circle. So our intention is to invite us to think about how do we, right, come to terms with our divisions, entrenched divisions, deep divisions, right? The political buzzword is the 7 counties, right? And the greater Minnesota. And I'm like, what's the greater Minnesota? Right? And why do we have language like that to kind of keep us continuously in this divided space? So our intent is to invite us to be present, to examine this divisions, right, as we come to November 3rd, right? So action, right, in our history will not go away. And then just a quick reminder, we have monthly events like this, right? Monthly events like this. So make sure you're clued in. If you don't know when the next presentation is, you can ask any of the board members here. You can privately chat with them, right? Board members, or you can openly ask when the heck is the next one, right? I'm really, 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 really glad to have Lindsey Mcmurran join us from the outstate of Minnesota, right? From Bemidji, right? I want to make sure that I do honor to her as I introduce her, but I want to at this point just kind of invite the sister to share with us some of the kinds of grounding, right? Circle expectations, grounding that she does, and only she does, the way she does it. So I want to silence myself and invite Lindsey to share with us her wisdom.
Thank you, Raj. Gawina pajini na ta anashinabe mosi, nenga gogeja tunji anashinabe moyan. Buju ni Lindsey indigena ka jaganashi mang, zagasquajima ka gendunjiba, and dash walker da. Welcome everybody. My name is Lindsey Mcmurran and I'm a citizen of the Leech Lake Nation of Ojibwe and live in northern Minnesota in the Walker area. Raj and I do some work up in the Bemidji area around restorative circles. And that's where the two of us connected, and I'm so thankful for that connection. I learned so much, and I appreciate being brought into events like this as well, to just continue to learn more and to continue to grow, right? Because it's a continual process for all of us. So in order for us to be here in this space together, I'd like to propose some group agreements as a starting point for our work together today. And I'm gonna go ahead and put those in the chat too, because I know some people like to be able to have that visual to read. And so the 4 key agreements that I'm proposing are these. What's said here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here, right? So it's always that confidentiality, wanting to respect everybody's stories, everybody's truth. But at the same time, taking what we learn from listening to others and bringing that along with us as we go out into the world. The second one is we will listen from a place of curiosity and not of judgment. Now that really, to me, is the crux of the conversation we're having today. I feel there's so much in our world that tells us that it's us versus them. And what that does, it does many things, but in this context, what it really does too, is it makes us so we constantly are listening to respond instead of listening to understand. So what we're gonna ask you to do today is to really lean in to that seeking to understand type of listening. We have 2 more group agreements that I'd like to offer. When we speak from our own truth. You know, there is something very meaningful and important about naming that each of us experiences the world in our own way. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the brain science section. And we need to speak our own truth. Again, in our country, you know, as a Native woman, oftentimes when I speak, people think I'm talking for all the Natives in the entire country. It's like, oh, I'm speaking my own truth. I'm bringing my own experiences, my own story forward. So that's what we're asking you to do today as well. And then finally, we will honor silence as part of the process. If someone pauses, be quiet and listen, okay? And I understand with the virtual format too, that this one is more important than ever. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, you know, when we're in the same room even, to know if people are just pausing to gather their thoughts or if, you know, they're completed. And so in our Zoom environment today, I just really want to emphasize this, this agreement more than ever, that really be mindful about pausing, about other people's ways of processing information. You know, the topics we're talking about are heavy. And so also realizing that, you know, in many of us, these types of conversations elicit a strong emotional response. So sometimes taking that pause to gather your thoughts, to collect yourself, to be mindful of your emotions is part of this work too. So that's part of what we want to practice here in our time together today. Does anybody have any additional agreements they would like to pose before we get going? Feel free to unmute or put those in the chat. Again, this is a collective space, right? This is a community that we're building. You know, relationship is such a key part of this work. And despite the fact that we're physically distanced, we want to remain socially connected, right? So that's why we're really opening up in this way and really trying to create this type of environment as much as possible, despite the virtual format.
Yes.
And so,
Thank you.
yeah, go ahead, Raj.
No, thank you, Lindsey. I want to, I don't want to not introduce our president. So our president of CRM is here. We lovingly call her Queen BB, but you all can call her Brenda Burnside, right? Miss Burnside, do you want to say a few words?
Not really. I was really into Lindsey and ready to listen, but you know, thanks for the acknowledgement. I appreciate it. But I just want to welcome everybody and let's get right into it. I'm plugged in.
We're plugged in. I love it. Love it. And please know that along with myself and Lindsey, right, we also have collaborating with let me get this right, the Minnesota Office of Collaboration and Dispute Resolution. Boy, that's a big group. If you are with the Minnesota Office of Collaboration and Dispute Resolution, please wave. Y'all wave. Where are people? Okay, nobody says it. Facilitator 3, I didn't see you wave. Okay, good. So we are collaborating with them. I think they are all being brought together with Dave Bartholomew, right? I think I'm saying that right. But Dave and I have known each other for a while, not always on a nice term, but we love each other. We agree to disagree all the time. But interesting, right? Interesting gathering of people. So, and there are facilitators for our breakout sessions. So real quickly, I want to introduce Lindsey, right? Lindsey is, as she mentioned earlier, is a citizen of Leech Lake Nation of Ojibwe. is the Director of Prevention Initiatives and Tribal Projects for Family-Wise Services. And Lindsey specializes in culturally responsive and restorative practices to increase understanding, build relationships, and increase compassion and empathy within communities. She's is doing some amazing work up in Bemidji with the law enforcement in the community. So it was on NPR a couple of, maybe a week ago or two. Lindsey facilitates training statewide in adverse childhood experience, right? Otherwise ACEs, epigenetics, and historical trauma, right? And she has worked with a lot of amazing people. Sam Simmons is one of them. And educates professionals and caregivers on strategies to prevent trauma, right? And build resilience. She's a strong advocate of community-driven work, right? Community solutions, right? And believes that the development of cultural, social, emotional competency is vital, integral in our well-being and ongoing success, right? As individuals, families, and communities. Please join me in welcoming Lindsey, y'all. Come on, give it up. Right, the next person is me, and yeah, it's not that important. So I will skip that, and then I will introduce Dave right now, but later on a little bit. Dave, as I mentioned, right, is a brother who works with the Office of Collaboration and Dispute Resolution for the state of Minnesota, right? In that position, he works on designing and implementing new approaches for the state, counties, and cities to work through and hopefully resolve, right, contentious issues. And they've been involved in a lot of different issues statewide, right, under different leaderships and different commissioners. In his role, he also supports community mediations programs that use trained volunteers to help their neighbors, courts, and communities resolve the many conflicts happening across our state. He is a qualified neutral. I don't know what that means. Dave can explain, but I don't like neutrals. I like people who stand on values, but I love them too, right? But it's probably a legal term, right? Supreme Court kind of thing. And in his spare time, right, he, I think he, played mayor on TV, or was he mayor in real life? I don't know. Like mayor of Circle Pines. I think it's like Lino Lakes area, right? But we love Dave, right? So Dave will show his handsome face here soon, right? And then what else? I think at this point, I am supposed to say something, and I don't know what that is, but I will jump in and as Lindsey was introducing her circle expectations and grounding rules, I was thinking about this idea of brave space, right? In a brave space, we invite people to not just be present, right? But also be present with their entire emotions and thought processes and perspectives, right? Unless and until we are able to share perspectives, we don't know how those perspectives may hurt people, right? May serve as a knee on people's necks and backs, right? As Jones would say, right? We can disagree and learn to love each other. We can have different perspectives and learn to love each other. But when your perspective undermines my humanity and leads to my oppression and leads to my a removal of my humanity, then we really need to address that perspective. It's no longer a perspective. It's a power. It's a privilege, right? And how do we address those things, right? In a way that, as Lindsey said, we are here to grow together, learn from each other, speak our truth, right? So in a brave space, all of those things happen, right? This is not just a safe space. We want it to be both a safe and a brave space. we want you to bring it, right? We want you to leave here and share what you have learned, right? Leave Sharon Press name out, right? Because Sharon is about to say some amazing things, right? Drop some knowledge on us. So don't use her name unless she gives you permission, right? Nicole, yes, always drops knowledge on us, right? DeAndre does the same thing. For me, I give you my permission to use my name. It's been used in so many different ways from by different groups of people. So it doesn't matter, y'all can share, right? But unless and until you have people's names, permission to share their names, don't share, but take the content, get it out, right? So that's kind of an introduction to Brave Space, right? So the presentation will be, I will make a few statements. Lindsey will talk about trauma-informed spaces and what trauma and how trauma affects our bodies, right? What is historical trauma? And then Lindsey will talk a little bit about living, being, and experiencing what it is like to be an Indigenous woman, right? In a country and in a land that was theirs, right? And what does that feel like today, right? Being reduced to 1% of the population, and yet 10% of the prison population, right? In the state of Minnesota. What does that all mean, right? So there's a lot of things that Lindsey is going to drop on us. And then we will talk a little bit about restorative approach as a community. And then we'll talk a little bit about handling tensions, right? Tense moments in our current political climate. So how many of us here feel tense? Like you can feel tense when you start talking about politics, even the P word, right? It's like, oh no, I don't want to talk about politics, right? Since we don't have men running around in tight pants catching some stupid ball, we call them what? Football, right? They look great in their tight pants, right? That's why some of us watch it, right? So it's but we don't have those kinds of distractions. Maybe this Sunday, right? I think it's coming. Ray's ready for it. Ray's like, man, I'm ready to see the Vikings play. But it's coming up, but we don't have a lot of that distraction. So the politics becomes tense. I love tension, right? Somebody was going to say something. Did I hear whisper? No. So we are going to talk a little bit about that. You're not going to walk out of here with all the answers you're looking for, but you're going to walk out of here with a breadth and a depth of ways to engage people, right? I want to invite Dave at this point to say a few words about OCDR and introduce the breakout facilitators.
You bet.
Go for it, Dave.
Thank you, Raj. I'm Dave Bartholomew, and I work for this long word called the Office of Collaboration Dispute Resolution at the Department of Administration at the state of Minnesota. The office is two people. It is Mariah Levison, whom you may know, who is my boss and colleague and is tremendous. Our office uses some collaborative processes, some collaborative problem-solving processes, and the science of human relations to help government and stakeholders improve relationships and build trust and process and develop hopefully some wise and durable solutions. We also support community mediation in Minnesota, which Raj has mentioned, and we do a lot of training and have a lot of materials on our website because we try to build capacity. So we have the 3 C's. We do cases of projects. We do then community mediation, we support that, and then we do capacity building. And so I won't go into a lot. We try to do innovative things. We try to do a lot of, put a lot of information up on our website. I would suggest you check that out. If you Google Minnesota MN and then OCDR, you'll find us at the state. There's a lot of materials about public engagement and some things like that that I think this group may find interesting. Also, there's a tremendous 7-minute video about the project we did in Falcon Heights after the Philando Castile killing. And that is a very good piece. And so there's some videos on our site that you may also want to check out. So thank you very much. We have facilitators with us today, 10 of them who are volunteering, who trained and volunteering to help you in the breakout groups. And so we're real excited about that. We hope that they'll help you come up with your feelings, your comments, and you being able to express that. And then we'll bring that back into the large group. But so we have 10 folks that are volunteered that are on our facilitator roster. Glad to have them. And that's the background on us. So back to you, Raj or Lindsey.
Yes. So thank you, Dave. We have facilitators. We have about 44 people in this session. So we might be like dividing people into like groups of 5 and have a facilitator for each, right? If that's how the distribution is made, or we can divide them into 4 people. So give everybody an opportunity to really dig in, right? Sometimes when you're in a bigger circle, you don't have an opportunity to often share. So I wanted to just kind of say a few words about the next part, the breakout rooms, right? We have a lot of questions, and I think the facilitators have all the questions, right, Dave? Okay, great. Facilitator 5, man, I love Facilitator 5, just like she gives me immediate responses, right? Thank you. So we need to do a bit of the presentation before breakout. Yes, thank you, Lindsey. So I appreciate it. So why don't I invite at this point, Lindsey to speak, say a few words about what's on her mind and in her heart. Go for it.
Thank you. All right. So just a little bit of background on myself, because I think it helps to know the perspective I'm coming from in this work. I work for an organization focused on social emotional learning, right? So focusing on communication, compassion, and connection, Peacemaker Resources out of Bemidji, as well as Raj mentioned in my introduction, family-wise services out of the Metro, who is expanding services to be statewide. And the work that we do, the common thread between the many hats I wear is really this belief that when we know better, we can do better, right? Speaking of Maya Angelou's quote, right? We do the best we can until we know better, and then when we know better, we are called to do better, okay? And so that really, to me, is kind of a grounding value in the work that I do. All of this work is continual growth, continual learning and unlearning. And oftentimes that unlearning piece is much more difficult than anything else. And I think about all the messages we're constantly told on a daily basis by the media, by social media, by friends, by family, by coworkers, by people who don't believe the way that we do. And we've been kind of tricked into thinking that it's an us versus them dichotomy, right? That there's the binaries, there's right and wrong, there's us versus them. And when it comes to the political spectrum, what we need to remember is that the underlying currents of what's driving these strong emotions and feelings, right? It's about our values, it's about our beliefs, it's about our family, about loved ones, right? About our own experiences, about our own traumas, about our own triumphs. And so often we lose that humanity. Particularly in this time right now with physical distancing, right? It's super easy to get behind a keyboard and spout off. and you know, that's one of the things that I just want to name. I think between the dual pandemics, right, of COVID and racial inequity finally being brought to the forefront of our public consciousness, I think there's so much stress at this time that this election year in particular is even more divisive than what we've seen in the past. And so I just want to name that and to think about our varied perspectives, even those of us here in this room today. We all have our own reasons for being here. We all have our own reasons for wanting to lean into this type of conversation. We also all have our own stressors, our own experiences, our own challenges that we've overcome in our lives, right? And one of the most important things for me when I think about conflict, when I think about that feeling, what's happening inside your body when you encounter danger, when you encounter stress, when you encounter disagreements. It's really helpful and grounding for me to understand the biological processes going on. So in all of my work, the place that we start, and what I want to do here for all of you today, is to do a super quick mini brain lesson, okay? So Dr. Dan Siegel is the author of The Whole Brain Child, as well as a variety of other work, really focusing on bringing neuroscience, psychology concepts to the community at large, right? Not only speaking to professionals, but speaking to parents, to caregivers, to anybody working with children, and anybody who interacts with other people, right? No matter who we are, that interpersonal communication is always going to be a part of our experience. So real quick, Dan Siegel has an activity he calls the hand-brain model to help understand, and Raj already knows, he knows where I'm going, how our brains work. So if everybody can yeah, there we go, can take their hand-brain model out if you're able. Now, our brains develop, our central nervous system develops from the most primitive to most advanced, right? And so imagine this as your spinal cord, right? Here's your brain stem. Hold your thumb over into the center of your hand. This represents our limbic system, our amygdala and our hippocampus, right? So what ramps us up and what calms us down. Now, this is that center in our brains of that fight, flight, or freeze response, okay? So information enters through all of our senses, travels up through our brainstem, stops here in our limbic system. That's where it goes first. And information will either stop here if it's deemed to be dangerous, or if it's deemed not to be dangerous, then it comes along forward, fold your fingers down into your cortex. And right here's your prefrontal cortex. So our prefrontal cortex is a part of our brain, right, that's responsible for that executive functioning, for reasoning, for responsible decision making, right, for planning and processing. Well, the important thing for us to realize is that when we run into conflict, for instance, or when we feel threatened, when we feel in danger, what happens in our bodies is that those cues from our outside world are brought into our bodies, come up into our brains, and what happens is they stop right here, especially if it has to do with survival or danger, right? And so essentially we're flipping our lids, so to speak, because our prefrontal cortex is going offline and we're operating entirely out of our fight, flight, or freeze response system, okay? And so it is a biological impossibility to access your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, when you're here in your survival brain. Now, this is important for us to understand when we're in conversations like this, right? Because what do you think happens when you're in conversation with someone and your values, your beliefs, what you hold here in your heart starts to run up against each other? Oftentimes what's happening is that we've flipped our lids, so to speak, right? We've gone offline, we're operating out of our fight, flight, or freeze response. And oftentimes the other person engaged in that conversation is in the same place. Do you think this is the point when we should be having these types of conversations? No. A dysregulated adult cannot have a good conversation or help another dysregulated adult, right? What we need to do is be mindful, bring ourselves back, practice our own coping strategies, our own self-regulation, co-regulation strategies that will allow us to operate instead from here, right? Our reasoning part of our brain. So thank you for indulging me there. Just by show of hands, how many people have been really mad before and said something you later regret? Every single one of us, right? And so it's so important for us to understand, again, the biological happenings in our body.
Lindsey, I didn't see Mike's hand go up, so you must be perfect.
He's good. I've been doing this for some, yeah. You know, it's so important for us to understand that. And if we had more time, we could even talk more about what's going on in our brains in terms of our negative bias, right? Implicit bias, that's where all those things come in too. So when we understand more about our physiology and the neurobiology behind stress and conflict, then it really, for me, helps us start out from a firmer foundation, right, when we're having conversations like these. what I want to encourage us to do is to notice. Notice when you're having those conversations that are hard. Notice where you feel it first in your body. And I bet people could already give answers, right? A lot of people know, hey, you know, I feel that feeling in the pit of my stomach first, or I feel heaviness on my chest, right? We are made to notice. We are made to have those warning signs before we get to this point. But it's times like these where we intentionally think about it, when we intentionally ground ourselves in this type of leaning in, that we're really able to then practice the noticing and practice how we can keep ourselves here in our thinking brains before we end up here. And so for me, that's such a key concept going forward in this conversation around healing the political divide. We don't need to agree with each other to get along, right? And it's, as Raj pointed out, and I so appreciate your eloquent way of putting that, is when it does bump up against my humanity, when it's something, you know, there certainly is times when we can look at that a little bit differently. But when we think in general about how we can have these types of conversations, how we can even approach these subjects. I met with our wonderful facilitators before our session today, and that was our conversation too. You know, we're Minnesota nice here. How do we even start to approach these hard conversations? As Raj said, we don't, you know, sports and the weather, that's Minnesota nice conversation, right? And what that acculturation has done to us is to tell us that it's bad to talk about politics. It's bad to talk about religion. It's bad to talk about race. It's bad to talk about your beliefs. And that's the exact opposite of the mindset we need to cultivate in this country today, right? We need to talk. We need to listen, more importantly. And when we listen, we need to seek to understand rather than listening simply to reply. Okay? So I'm doing a time check, and we had so much content that we brainstormed about sharing with you in this presentation portion before we move into discussion. So I'm going to pause for a moment and turn to Raj and see if there's anything pressing that you want to add before we kind of condense our version here and go into breakouts.
No, as you were saying that, I wanted to make sure that I do justice to this presentation by this amazing Robert Jones, right? And he says, we can agree, we can disagree and still love each other. And unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist, right? When that happens, y'all, it's time for us to stop and say, ask a different type of a question. And I appreciate Lindsey's wisdom, and please use this, please use this. I've used this in so many places. It makes so much sense. People are like, oh, that is helpful, right? I want to pick up from what Lindsey was talking about and say, you know, asking ourselves, you know, this idea of how well is our community, right? How is restorative is our communities. I grew up in a space where it's always about zero-sum game. If Lindsey wins, I lose, right? If facilitator 4 wins, facilitator 3 loses, right? If Kay wins, right, Cecilia will lose, right? If Amy wins, Sharon will lose, right? I notice you, Amy Bang, you can't hide from me. So kind of, you know, there are so many different ways we have been brought up to think, right? My gain is their loss. And so, and we tend to always ask ourselves, you know, why are we in that space? And when you are in that space, right, as Lindsey said, we are both in this location, and we are both struggling, and I have a hard time kind of having a conversation, right, with each other. We're not in a restorative space. We are in a competitive space where adversarial, right, shouting is the only way to resolve, right? I'm going to speak louder than you are to drown you. Instead of saying, I'm going to speak to my value, I want to invite you to speak to your value so we can figure out where our true clashes are, right? As opposed to taking it to this adversarial process. So asking ourselves, you know, how restorative our communities are at this point. I'm going to use some expletives in this presentation. So if you are uncomfortable with it, I apologize right away. You can turn me off, right? But I remember in 2016, sometime either September, October, driving up to St. Cloud. And if you're from St. Cloud, it has nothing to do with you, right? Just me going towards St. Cloud. And I noticed a big old crane, right, hoisted. I had this big old sign. And as I got closer to the sign and looked up at the sign, it says, right, it read, and I quote, "Hillary is the C word." I'm thinking like, holy cow. What is that? And just, I still had to get to St. Cloud State University. When I was driving back, it was darker, right? And there was this floodlights on this same sign with the same words, "Hillary is the C word." I'm like, wow, right? Where is this coming from? Right? What is this? Right? So I was really shocked because I feel like I'm in a bubble in the Twin Cities, and especially with my group, right? And so, and in our group, we feel like we are in a restored space where our conflicts and stuff, we talk about our conflicts as our differences and all those things. But I'm like, wow, how do we even address some of these kinds of tensions that we see that are so palpable now, right? In the past, it was sort of kind of hidden in the niceness, right? But today, it is just out there, right? It is out there. At a place I work out, I heard this guy said, we just have to mow these protesters down. And I'm like, whoa, that was like last week. I'm turning around and I'm like, what did you say? Right? And then everybody looked at me. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm just gonna walk away from this, right? Even in that space, right? I'm like, wow, how do you like talk about this, right? So, because we don't talk about those things, right? We talk about what bicycling, how far they ran and how much they work out, as opposed to really talking about these deeper issues. There are a lot of barriers that are in place, right? The barriers, to name a few, right, is political ideologies, and then we have dogmas, right? Like this, some of us have grown up thinking like, this is the right way, right? This is the only right response. There's right response, there's wrong response. We have sort of a righteous way of looking at things, right? And I have been on my righteous high horse a lot in the past and continue to be, right? And probably will be until the time I pass on, right? So I just need to be conscious of whenever I get on that horse, right? Whenever I get on that horse. I have a few people who will check me, right? Our Queen BB will usually check me, call me out.
Absolutely, I'm gonna help you with that.
Yes, right? Yeah, she does. I mean, I appreciate the sister for that, right? I've had run-ins with Sharon Press, right? And we know we have differences, right? I've had run-ins with Mike, right? But we are in a restored space, so we can kind of really do this work and continue to walk this path, right? Continue to walk this path. And then I also want to say that, those barriers, right, doesn't just stop with these dogmas, right? We have this sort of what Paulo Freire calls, right, magical consciousness. When we are young, we believe in Santa Claus and all those things. We believe in Superman, right? Someday we will be super person or whatever. And then we move into this sort of naive consciousness. And in naive consciousness, we have come to accept, oh, families means this, law enforcement does this, the courts do this company does that. you know, they all just simply do what they're supposed to do, right? We just kind of don't ever critically examine the work they do. And earlier, Dave pointed out the work in Falcon Heights when we did the Philando Castile shooting, right? One of the things that you find from the community members is that most of them just sort of for 22 years accepted whatever law enforcement did there. Never questioned them, right? Never questioned them. The mayors never looked at the data, right? Of who is disproportionately getting stopped, right? All of those questions, because we just simply say, law enforcement is trained, they will do everything right. So when they stop somebody, they probably deserve it, right? And there's sort of this naive consciousness that we all have developed because we are so institutionalized, right? Unless, and Paulo Freire said, unless we move into that critical consciousness and start to examine questions and examine values, examine perspectives, we're not going to break this, right? We're going to continue to have these kinds of divisions, right? The idea that you rounded out 15 million people in this land, and today are told that there were nobody living here when the Europeans came. And institutions, churches, and many others just simply accepted that reality. This was a wild place, right? And growth was just happening, right? So we came to tame and rape the land. And people just believed it, right? So I want to appreciate that. Invite Lindsey, if you want to say anything beyond that, and then we can kind of break them up into groups. Go for it.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out too, about that Indigenous history piece. You know, that's another piece that I bring to the table to offer. In the work that I do is to talk more about the impact of historical trauma, epigenetic inheritance, intergenerational adversity, to really help us get at the roots of the issues for which we are seeing the symptoms of and the problems that we see in our society today, right? But what we need to understand is that what we're seeing today, the unrest, the disparities when it comes to my Indigenous community, to the Black African-American community, to the Latinx community, like there's a reason those disparities exist. And once we start looking at the root causes, then we can start coming up with solutions that fit, right? And conversations like this, to me, is such a huge, crucial part of that uncovering, of that rediscovering so much of what we need to come together as a country for once, for real. So anyhow, the last thing that I want to bring to your attention is that idea of that Raj surfaced, that it's not only talking about the lived experience, right? He used that Philando's community in particular, saying, you know, it's been 20 years, generation worth of just accepting that type of treatment. I want us to think about that, because that is those intergenerational cycles of adversity that members of our community are experiencing. When you add in there to the fact that the body does keep the score, not only for us, but for what communities, generations before us have had to endure as well, then it really helps us to understand in a different way why we're seeing such a spotlight, and why this tension is finally coming to the surface. So I want us to think about that. As we move into our next section, we want to give you guys ample time to have conversation in groups. So that's where we're transitioning now. But I want to pose a question to you. I want you to think of a time recently in the political unrest, the climate that's full of political unrest right now, when you were confronted with something uncomfortable. So think about that time. And then I want you to think about how your body felt. Did you feel the tension in your shoulders? Did you start to kind of draw inward? Or on the other hand, did it start to instead explode outward, right? How do you feel thinking about it now? And so I wanted to give you that first question, because that is going to be the first prompt we move into in our breakout rooms. I'm going to pause for a moment and look at Raj. Is there anything else you want to do before we break out?
Let's move it.
All right. So Lauren is going to go ahead and bring us into our rooms. You'll have a facilitator there with you who will help restate that question as well as help us move through this discussion. So thanks everybody for your attention. Lauren, I turn it over to you.
All right, thanks Lindsay and Raj. So what's going to happen is a little box is going to pop up in front of your screen and it's going to ask you to join a breakout room. So just click that little box, and if you don't see it, well, you'll just stay here with me and I'll help. All right, here we go.
Where is Nicole? Thank you, Nicole, for making me stop. She sends me a note, Lindsay. She's like, Raj, stop. Man, I will stop right now.
Well, seriously, like trying to do this in 15 minutes to kind of present all of this information. It's hard, but I'm excited.
I was trying to keep Dave laughing too, you know. He's a hard man.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, DeAndre, are you going to join a breakout room?
Yeah, he better.
Oh, he just went. Okay.
Um,
Okay, so Dave, do you have an interest in popping around in the rooms or the facilitators? Do you guys
I
want
do.
to
I
pop
do.
in?
I want to pop around.
Okay. Should I take you all to the same room at the same time or just kind of rotate you around separately?
Rotate.
But do you want to go together or separately?
I've got like my second can of caffeine, y'all.
Okay, Raj, I'm assigning you to room 1. And then I'll
Okay.
move. How long do you want to be in there? Just a couple of minutes and then I move you again?
Sure.
Or how about you come back to the main room when you're ready?
There you go.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Okay, Raj, there's yours. And Lindsay, you want to go in rooms?
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Okay. Dave, you want to go in some rooms?
Sure. And you're doing a great job here, Lauren. This is just great.
Thanks, Dave.
Amazing technology here.
Yeah, I hope your facilitators are having fun. Okay, here you go. Oh, Miss Lori Whipple, you came back. Hey there, Lori.
Hey, she just left.
She left?
Left.
Wow.
Well, she's not in here anyways, in this room. So.
She's assigned into a breakout room.
Okay.
Hopefully she went in there. She
Yeah.
was in there and then she came back. Uh-oh.
Okay.
Breakout room 4 only ended up with 4 people, like 2 people in it. What the heck happened? Like, oh, I guess that must be where, how did that I think some people left because I had a couple people assigned into a room and now they're gone.
Hmm.
Okay, that means I need to go and ask if somebody's willing to move. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go and talk to them.
Okay. What? Okay.
Okay, they're good.
Still recording.
Oh, well, why don't you pause
Do
it?
you want me to stop it?
Otherwise, just, no, don't stop it. Just hit pause.
She got too much energy.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So
Recording.
Elizabeth, will you put that in the chat?
The main chat?
Yeah.
all right, welcome back, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and jump back in. We gave you a little bit of extra time in your groups because we knew we kind of went over on our end. And so we do have some time to hear in the large group here, in our large circle, what was it that you're talking about? Where were you at? And Lauren tells me that the facilitators will be prepared to kind of share the harvest.
Yeah.
So anybody who wants to go first?
We just did the wild rice harvesting, y'all. Let's do this.
I see Kelly. You want to go ahead?
I'll go first. Hi, I had a wonderful group. Thanks to everyone's great participation. I took notes and it was really lovely to be part of it. So just the high levels of focusing on the question, sort of, how do we move this forward and how do we support? Just checking in with ourselves, and when feeling dysregulated, people talked about making sure to step away more, get grounded, revisit when you're sort of are more present, can use I statements without lashing out or bashing out. A lot of us talked about mindfulness, making sure that we center and be mindful, and so pulling the fingers back down, looking for humanity in others when we're feeling heightened. And then reminding ourselves to continue to seek to understand. Folks talked about making sure to ask thoughtful questions to draw out those perspectives from others, giving physical cues that you're open to listening, even if maybe what they're saying is just like clenching you up, just again, to facilitate that conversation. Again, knowing when to step in and when to say, you know what, I need to back out. Name it with the other person and returning to the conversation later. Understanding what your role is at the moment. Like, am I a bystander? Am I a target? Am I a part of a restorative community or a restorative circle? And that will dictate sort of how you enter into the conversation and what happens. And then again, this idea of trying to reflect this neutrality, asking for more information, seeking to understand. And finally, again, this is similar, recognizing that sometimes we're just going to be overwhelmed and it's not a space or time we can engage. And so we need to leave and step back. Anybody from the group want to chime in to?
Kelly, we'll just do with you first and then we'll open it up to others.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But I just want to kind of quickly add something that, along with what Lindsey said in terms of the limbic system and how if we are here, right, and we are doing this, it's hard for us to listen to one another. I also want to say that, there are cultures and systems that says that survival mode, right, that we have been on for thousands of years, because that's what kept our humanity alive when we were part and parcel and roaming and we were faced with a lot of threats and danger. Let's honor that too, right? Honoring people who are in that space and not saying, oh, you come back to me when you are here, right? And only then will I talk to you, right? You're dismissing their reality. Right? So let us honor them. If they are in this space, let us acknowledge that. And if we are in this space, let us acknowledge that. Right? Let us not dishonor them, because survival looks different, right? For people. A researcher studied about gangs, and he was playing with kids in this neighborhood in Chicago. And he was shooting the basketball. He was a horrible basketball player, but nobody was checking him. Nobody was guarding him. And he threw the ball. The ball gets into the net. And then he's like, hey, man, why? What's going on? And then he saw all of the kids were on the ground, right? They were all on the ground. And he's like, what's going on? And the kids were like, get your ass down on the ground. Get your ass down on the ground right now. And he's like, what's going on? These children, right, young children, heard a car screeching, tires screeching. They immediately jumped. They knew there was something about to go down, right? Let us honor that survival mode, right? Because that's what kept them alive. And so this is beautiful. I just want to acknowledge that this is also what is important for many. So, next facilitator.
I can go. Facilitator 6. What really struck me with our group, we had Nick and Patricia and Mark and Mike, is that they said to have the courage to enter the conversation, to be courageous about it, to be able to speak to it, to ask good questions for a meaningful conversation, to focus on values, not beliefs. So those were the main high points from our conversation.
Thanks, Donna. Who else would like to share?
Lindsey, I think one of the things that Lindsey talked about, right, the idea of values earlier when she said these are guiding principles, those principles are not just for us to have a conversation. You can actually take all of that and become representative of the values in which you walk, right? It doesn't have to be you wait for strangers to talk to you. You can practice, as our Queen Bibi, our president, often say, you can do circle anyway, right? So continuously practicing this process of being, making it a culture versus a methodology or a strategy, right? Walk away from all of that colonized thinking, right? Let it become part and parcel of your way of being. So whether it's family, whether it's friends, right? Anyway, practice this process, put it into place.
And when you focus on that being, then the doing comes naturally, right? And that's brain science too. You know, it's all about those neural networks and creating those pathways, and the really robust pathways are those experiences and those things that we practice time and time and time again. And the easiest way to be able to return to those grooves that have been created when we're even in this state is if that we've practiced so much that those grooves are easy to fall into.
Next, any other facilitators?
I can go with the notes for our group 1. I guess that was our room 1.
Yeah.
This was an amazing conversation, and it was almost difficult to capture this in words. We could have had another hour or more, but we did talk. Some of the things came about just how we can personally handle some of the conflict was talk about connectivity and connecting with others, taking that time to get together. You know, we're doing a lot of the virtual circles now, and it's meaningful and helpful. Also about confronting our privilege that we hold, and how we can use that privilege to hold yourselves and others accountable. We talked also, I just like the whole thought about the beloved community, and so Brenda, that was like beautiful. But creating that community where you see the humanity in others, and not just actions, where you feel comfortable and safe in your community, and can help by pushing others towards being more restorative. I just have to think more about that because it was kind of beautiful. He's also talking about embracing conflict as a way of, not as something horrible and bad, but as a way to make us aware of what we need to fix. Talked about some actions or reading and working through some of these books. And there's so many great books out there, the books on white supremacy, the books on my grandmother's hands, and doing that as a groups. And talking about how we can go about embracing and including others that are really different from us. I think there's a lot, and we'll put a lot more of this in the written comments because you guys had a lot to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Ona. I know you're from St. Cloud, right? Am I correct? Yeah. I'm like, man, it's been a while.
It has.
Yes. I appreciate what you said. I'm want to be, continuously hammer that point, at least to say that, conflict is not the problem, right? What do they say? The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of love is not hate, but indifference, right? When we withdraw from conflicts and really pull and say, oh, those people don't know what they're saying, and I know, but I'm not going to share. Right, that leads to a lot of poisoning of our relationships, right? So let us not be indifferent. Let us be present, right? And as Lindsey reminds us, when you focus on the being, right, the action that will come, right? The doing will come. So appreciate that. Let us be in conflict. Conflict does not equal to, right, hurting each other, harming each other. Others to share?
I can share from group 5. Hi, everyone. I'm Jill. So our group spoke predominantly from a perspective of white female and talking about just the awareness of the physical response and how to really acknowledge where those emotions are coming from, and suggesting that perhaps it's coming from unrecognized privilege or not understanding, and also acknowledging that we may work with individuals and not know their stories, and how important it is to take time to learn about other people that we work with, to be in community, and making spaces safe for people to have those emotions and to be able to hear without feeling like pausing, without feeling like we have to respond. And also being okay with our own discomfort and owning our discomfort, and being okay with possibly being wrong and owning that. And the importance of really just time came up, pausing, time, reflection, slowing down. That's what we talked about.
Thank you.
Lindsey, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just trying to be mindful of time here too. A couple things I want to mention. First, being in the chat, you'll notice that our facilitators are entering the group responses in a working Word document, where all participants also are encouraged to keep that link, take a look. We realize, facilitators are sharing, and we also want to make sure we're hearing all voices as well. And so, Raj, just looking at the time, do we want to shift a little bit from the full group harvest? Okay. Yeah. Thank you, facilitators. Thank you for giving those great summaries of what was spoken about in your group. I know we didn't get to all of the groups. And do please also feel free to enter those in the chat. What your group talked about is important. We want to hear it. And we also, just being mindful of time, want to allow for an opportunity to kind of explore a little bit further some of these thoughts that were brought up already and what these action items are. So often people come to this work and they want a neatly packaged solution, right? Tell me what to do. And we know that because of the nature, the complexity of relationship, the dynamics around race relations and political divisions in our country, there's no easy answers, right? But one of the things that I really want to encourage, and that I hear being said, but in different ways in our discussion today, is to really highlight that difference between calling out, right? The call out culture, you know, that's about pointing out, you know, and in a really angry way when we hear something being said or something being shared that comes up against our values, our belief system. Now, there's a time and place for that, most definitely. Hear my heart here. But I also want us to think about the difference between calling out versus calling in. Calling out tends to create more division, right? Calling out is, I want my point heard, I don't care about yours. Calling out is a break in connection, a break in relationship. We need to be radical in the way that we approach this. The ways that we've, these kinds of conversations, the way that we've always done things has gotten us to where we're at today, right? So I want us instead to think about a more restorative approach, which is, instead of calling out, calling in. And that's exactly what I've heard being reflected even in the action items that your groups put together, right? That idea of instead inviting people into those conversations so we can listen and learn from each other, so we can really seek to understand. So that being said, I want us to think about another element that we touched on briefly, but maybe not as deeply as I would have hoped to give some background on. But the other piece of that is also having to do with the experiences of our own families, the experiences of our ancestors, experiences of generations that have come before us. You know, as an Indigenous woman, I think about the fact that immediately when I approach certain institutions, certain people in positions of power, like I go here without anything verbally, physically even having to happen first, right? When I think about sometimes approaching some of our educational systems, juvenile or the justice system, child protective services system, because of the experiences of my people. And knowing that historically in our country, with our Indigenous communities and our Black African American communities in particular, because of the founding, the origin, how our country was founded in the first place, every single one of us who live here now carries historical trauma within us. Now, I heard my grandmother's hands mentioned, and one of the points that I really appreciate in there, that it's not just talking about brown and Black body trauma, right? We're talking about white body trauma too, because all of us have been impacted, no matter what role we've played, no matter what role our ancestors played, no matter how we feel and that we're a good person, right? You know, oftentimes they hear, well, I'm not racist, I'm a good person. And we really need to separate racism from being racist, right? So all of that to say, what I'm interested in bringing into the conversation now, and this is open to everybody to respond. I want us to think about our own ancestry, our own lived experience, the stories that our family has told us, and how that relates to our values, our beliefs, our own political positions and stances. So all that into consideration, does that bring up anything for anybody? What role might history have played out that your family doesn't talk about? Are there ways that you see things being reverberated in your own life when it comes to conversations like this? We'll just open up the floor if that brought up anything for anyone.
Well, I know for me, it brings up the story of my mother being from Sicily, a Sicilian, and the mafia being associated with that. And that people didn't talk about, in coming to this country, the family didn't talk about how were they involved, what happened, you know, but always the stories of the can of olive oil that would show up at my grandmother's door that somebody said, you know, it fell off the back of the truck. When the neighborhood changed from the Italian neighborhood to all of a sudden having African Americans moving into the neighborhood and the Italians then getting out as quickly as they could, just all of that history that came to the States, but then was also here in the States, and that the family never really dealt with. It was not something we kept talking about. We just told as a story, but never really discussed.
You know, thank you. I do want to, there was two things that I saw in the chat, and I don't know who's saying what. I want to say, someone said about people embracing their white privilege, right? And it's good because once you know if people are embracing their white privilege, you also know that they do not have have a good narrative or an understanding of other people's stories and realities and celebrations and accomplishments, right? There are a lot of ways our histories have been deceiving, right? From the beginning, we were told there was no one in this place, and the people who are here only were half human, right? And so different ways historically we have dehumanized and disenfranchised, right? Communities, especially the IB communities, right? The Black and Indigenous communities have been dehumanized for a long, long time. They've been used as experimental, for experimental purposes, right? So medical communities are still having difficulty trying to engage the Black community because they've been victimized for so long. So so once people understand people's narratives, stories, right, and associate that culture and community to accomplishments that we are benefiting from, then reality starts. So we have to lean in, invite people to lean in to find out, right? If you like summer sports like kayaking, know that kayaking comes from indigenous cultures. They introduced us to kayaking. It's not some white sports, right? From traffic lights, right? Knowing that comes from a brother in Kentucky. Breonna Taylor's case is going on, right? So all of these ways for us to lean into change that narrative. And I think someone said roles are important. I think roles are important. I do not come into any space as a faculty member, right? For me, I come into every space as a human being. And I want to invite us to come into spaces as human beings. Stop playing your role, Carl. I don't need experts. I want human beings, right? I understand the need in a structural capitalistic systems structure roles, but we are seriously missing our humanity in spaces. We dehumanize everything. We walk into a courtroom and we have structures and status and all that stuff. They forget to understand the stories of our young people who are facing all kinds of struggles, right? Somebody talked about the Italian experience. When the Italians got together and wanted to demand to put that statue in front of the state building in 1928, right? In 1931, it was erected. We did not care about the native communities. And when they brought it down, we were like, oh my God, how dare, right? So I think it's really important for us to be present in all of these spaces with human beings.
Yeah, and I think too, Carla, thank you for sharing that story and that perspective, because I think another part of our nation's history that was done very intentionally was to pit marginalized groups against each other, right? That was another tactic used to divide and conquer, right? And so if we can think about that, and we can incorporate the lessons from that, right, into how we interact with one another. And it's not about competing. I work with Dr. Anton Troyer a lot, and he talks about, it's not the oppression Olympics, right? We don't need to compete with each other about how badly we've been treated. That being said, there is a time and space to be able to share, because I really believe being heard is part of healing too. Yeah. Right, most definitely. That being said, I think now that we're able to clearly pinpoint those points of division where again the root causes of so much of the division we're seeing in our country today comes from, then we can start addressing it in real ways. And so it's important to name it. It's important to acknowledge it. This time right here is a healing space because we're taking the time. We're taking the time to talk about these things and to listen to each other, even though we may come from very different backgrounds, very different political ideologies. And I want to name that too. And it's so important for me because, you know, it's easy to stand up on a soapbox and talk about this when you're in a space where you feel like everybody thinks the same way you do.
Yeah.
You know, when the rubber hits the road is when you're in a space and your own values and ideals are being pushed up against, right? And so it's times like these that we need to remind ourselves that I just made an assumption here too, right? And I want to name that as well. We can't assume that because we value restorative practices, because we value conversations like this, that we may all lean one way or the other either. That's part of what's wrong in these conversations, that it's always more of an us versus them mentality, where really it's us versus the problem, right? Yeah. So just some food for thought there. I have some messages coming from Lauren, who is great at keeping us a little bit more on track. So I want to mention a couple of things. And that is that we have shared earlier that document where all of your great harvests from your conversations are being placed. Lauren's going to put that on the screen right now so we can even watch it in live time. I always think it's so funny that there's apparently some anonymous armadillos and giraffes in the room adding their input there. So here's the other piece that I want to encourage you to do. Facilitators are entering what you talked about, particularly that third question, those action items. However, what we want to encourage you to do as well is if you don't see your thoughts being represented fully, I want participants to also feel like they can add to that list also, right? Because we know as facilitators too, it's hard to kind of scribble down the notes and make sure you're capturing everybody's ideas. So we just want to also offer the fact that please feel free to read that list, to take it, use it. I know that the center will be using it in some capacity too to inform things. But what we really want, again, this is your space, your ideas. So please continue to add to that document. Anything else, Lauren, that you wanted me to bring to attention? All right.
We also, I had to unmute, we also have a survey that we're going to be dropping in just a couple of minutes, and we're asking that everybody try to fill it out before you leave today, because those survey responses are really going to be helpful for us. So our chat, amazing chat wizard, DeAndre, is going to drop it in the chat at 11:55. So be looking for it and try to click on it and fill it out. And Raj will be closing us out just about now too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lauren. Let me invite, we are giving our president 2 minutes to say a few words, and then we will do our closing. So Presidente Queen Bee, go for it.
I just want to thank everyone for participating today. It's been wonderful discussion, and I hope that you are taking away nuggets that you can use to build a restorative community around yourselves. I hope you will make it personal, local, and immediate. I'm hoping that you will take the things that we've shared to heart. That's the purpose of these conversations. It's not just for you to come and to, get a lecture or to take some notes. It's for us to actually start to do these things and improve our communities through the things that we learn. And I'll just share a quick story is that I went to a wild rice harvest celebration about 5 years ago. And as a result of conversations that I had there, I have actually stopped celebrating the actual Thanksgiving Day holiday. And that's simply because people shared with me that it perpetuated the historical insult that initially of Thanksgiving and the massacre that happened there. And I just think about things that we do in our daily walk that make people feel invisible or that perpetuate some of the historical harms that we've experienced here in our country. So I would invite you, just as a challenge, to first examine your own lives and the things within your own lives that may be adding to a non-restorative society, and to start to eliminate those things. You might not be able to change legislation or laws at this point in your life or in your position, but you can change things that you do. And that will then lend to the larger society. So I thank you for being here. I appreciate all that has been shared. We value all of your opinions, and I hope that you will share out in the survey that we're going to share with you what you really feel about these sessions, and maybe we can get back to some of this at a later date. So thank you, Raj. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes just to speak, and thank you all for being here, and please continue to come back.
Hey, I want to thank you, President Brenda Burnside. I also want to acknowledge all of our board members who have been diligently working on it. All the board members, raise your hands and just kind of give a wave so people know that nothing is happening without all of these community members coming together. Andy has been just amazing and so many years held this together. So appreciate you, and it's good to see you.
I also want to thank Lindsey. Try not to flip my lid.
Yeah. Lindsey,
so much.
Right, well, go ahead. Lindsey, yes. I want to invite you to close your eyes, if you will, and focus on your breath while I read this and let this sink in, right? And then invite you for one closeout exercise. So as you breathe in, I want you to listen to the words here by Clarissa Estes. The title is Let Stories Happen to You. She says, I hope you will go out and let stories happen to you, and that you will work them, water them with your blood and tears and your laughter till they bloom, till you yourself burst into bloom, right? Let those stories, let us understand each other. Let us not be in the trappings of greater Minnesota, us, the South, right? Midwest, Northeast, all red states and blue states. All these things are ways to divide us as opposed to unite us. We want to call it in, not call out. We are not practicing cancel culture. We are practicing inclusive practices and inclusive culture. So if you will, we have 3 minutes. I want to invite you all to use the chat box and write down, what is your takeaway? One word takeaway. Go for it. I want to see it. Let it come. In your chat box. Hope. I love it. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. Thanks and surveys. Find comfort in your discomfort. Grow. Right? I want to add, just not grow, but also thrive. Right? Not just here, but let us thrive as human beings. Space for others. Humanity. Listen. Reflection. Come on, folks. Let's do this. Confrontation. Wow, truly. Okay, being in process, engage and call. Truly have courageous conversations, not confrontations. Thank you, Amy. Please consider filling out the evaluation. Oh, well, whatever. Engage and call in. Yes, yes, yes. Please do, right? Take away and share. Restoration. Right? Restoration. Speak out, right? Speak out. Change yourself. We got 1 more minute before our president will jump on me. So we are planning on finishing it at noon. Change yourself, right? Change starts with you, as Lindsey said, right? It has to start inside, right? You need to nurture people's stories and your stories. Let it bloom in you, right? Go out, listen to people, right? Don't get angry at what John, whatever the brother was saying in Hugo, Minnesota, right? Listen to the pain the brother was experiencing and explaining, right? John Thompson, right? Communication, internalize, like Michael Jackson says, it all starts with the man in the mirror. I love that song.
Sing it, Raj.
I love that
We'll
song.
go out with you singing it.
Man in the mirror. Come on, y'all. I love y'all. Thank you.
Change his way.
Now you go. Come on.
Go ahead, Raj.
Sing it.
Everybody, please click the link to the survey and be filling that out while Raj and Brenda sing your way out.
Yeah. Brenda, come on.
CRM choir.
That's what we used to do in training.
Yes.
We used to
Come
do
on, Brenda. Go for it.
Raj. No, Raj, go.
Okay, y'all. Get out of here. Have a good weekend. Lindsay is going to go to New Jersey and do training. So, Lindsay, enjoy. Take care. Love y'all.
Safe travels.
Yes.
Bye.
Peace out.
See you all in October, second Saturday, 10 to 12 for our next webinar.
Yes.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.